Now I'd like to introduce our fourth speaker, Joe Miller from the Marine Stewardship Council from right here in the UK. Marine Stewardship Council protects the oceans and safeguards seafood and supplies for the future through safe certification processes, among other strategies. Many of you might have seen the MSC logo either on restaurant menus or on packaging for seafood. I know I see it in the US. So let's give a warm welcome to Joe Miller.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm head of PR at the Marine Stewardship Council. I've worked in communications and public relations for my whole career, primarily working with organisations trying to protect our environment and drive behaviour change towards people doing more to preserve the beautiful world that we live in. I want to start by telling you a little story about my 30th birthday, which was before I worked at the MSC. I was lucky enough to spend this special day on beautiful island in southern Cambodia. It's honestly one of the most magical places that I've ever been. In the morning, my now husband and I went diving, and in the shallows around the island we saw beautiful coral, millions of colourful fish. But we were very saddened to see that as we went further out into the ocean, a lot of the coral had been destroyed, it was broken and dead. And we were told later that that was because dynamite fishing used to be practiced in that area and the reef still hadn't recovered. At lunchtime, for a special treat, we decided to go to a beach restaurant, just really a table on the beach, which was run by a local fisherman. And we'd seen some fellow travellers there a few days before eating what looked like amazing spider crab, like massive. And we thought that would be a good birthday treat. So we sat down and we asked for a crab. And the fisherman looked at us with delight and said, "You're in luck. I have only one crab today, and you're the first people here, so it's yours." He then said, "If you'd come yesterday, we wouldn't have had any crab, and we didn't catch any the day before either. And in fact, there's a lot fewer crab that we're catching now than we ever used to." And we enjoyed that crab. It was delicious, with a slight sense of guilt. Was the fact that he was catching less crab a result of the destruction that we'd seen, or perhaps the fact that more tourists were coming to the area? So fast forward 2 years, I found myself in an interview for the Marine Stewardship Council. And one of the questions that I was asked was, what do you think the challenges are of protecting our oceans and ensuring sustainable fishing? And I went straight back to that remote place and had a huge sense of empathy for that fisherman who was providing for his family, making the most of the opportunities that tourism was bringing, but also a sense of sadness for what we'd seen happening in the beautiful environment that they were so, should be so treasured. And I gave an answer about education and economics and development. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it must have been good because I got the job. And then ever since then, so the last 3 or 4 years, I have just learnt so much about the world of seafood and oceans that, I never dreamed even existed before I got that job. The challenge of protecting our oceans is enormous. Oceans cover 70% of the Earth's surface. We rely on them, everyone relies on them, for the oxygen that we breathe. Every second breath we take, the oxygen comes from the ocean. They regulate our climate, and they provide protein to billions of people. About 1 billion people rely on seafood as their primary source of protein, and the majority of them are in developing countries. It's also an incredibly source of livelihood in communities. More than 200 million people are employed directly in fishing. And by the nature of fish, they're global. They don't observe jurisdictions or governments. In fact, species like tuna might swim across 30 different government jurisdictions. So tackling this problem needs to be done at a global scale. Today, according to the UN, about a third of all fish stocks are overfished. 60% are at their maximum sustainable limits, and both of those numbers are increasing. So as our population grows and demand for seafood increases, that pressure on our ocean is just getting bigger and bigger. So I work in a global organisation, and the solution that the MSC provides and how it's trying to bridge the distance between this infinitely global problem and what on your plate when you're eating it seems so simple. I don't think most consumers would ever imagine where their fish came from, that it might, a fish caught in Alaska quite possibly travelled to China to be processed and then back to your plate. Fish is, incidentally, the most globally traded commodity, more than coffee or sugar. So the MSC tries to work with the industry and create a tool and a mechanism to drive change and bring people together and close the distance between this insurmountable challenge and our everyday purchases. 20 years ago, when the MSC was created through a partnership with WWF, a big NGO, and Unilever, then one of the owners of one of the biggest seafood brands in the world, they wanted to bring together disparate voices in order to create a single point around which communities could collaborate. So the Marine Stewardship Council's Sustainable Fishing Standard was created in consultation with scientists, NGOs, industry experts, fisheries managers, to try and give a definition of sustainable fishing, which incidentally is very hotly debated and constantly evolving because science and innovation and conservation constantly change. But what it means is that a responsible fishing organisation can choose to be independently assessed to a standard to determine whether or not it's sustainable. Retailers, chefs, brands, like the ones you might have seen the label on, can then choose to put that label on their packaging to say that their fish has come from a responsible fisher. And as more consumers recognise that label, so the cycle continues, the incentive for more fishing organisations, governments, policymakers to invest in their communities and fishing operations increases, and hopefully there's more sustainable fish. Now, the MSC has done a huge amount of work in the last 20 years. About 12% of all wild-caught fish is now eligible to carry that label, but there's still an incredible amount to do. And that's where I feel that I can add value through my work in PR and communications. There's been a lot of talk about storytelling at this conference, and what I try to do with my colleagues is tell the story behind that blue logo. So I've been very fortunate at the MSC to travel to places as far as South Africa, to Iceland, where I've met fishermen who are incredibly proud of what they're doing to preserve the environment, avoiding fishing sensitive habitats, and I want to tell those stories. And we have so many tools now with which to do that. Social media, digital platforms, traditional media, transforming the way that we can get that message out. Working with ambassadors and influencers like chefs and brands and celebrity surfers as well. The message that I want to leave with you all today is, yes, the challenges are enormous, but the tools that we have and the energy behind correcting some of those is also enormous as well. So I feel positive for the future, and that's what keeps me motivated in my job.
Thank you, Jo. So what you might not know is Jo is also a brand new mother. And I think just came back from maternity leave, so...
I'm still on maternity leave.
So we're just going to give her another round of applause.
Should give a round of applause to my parents for looking after my baby. They've had a hard job.
Are there questions for Jo from the audience.
Christine from Armenia. I'm doing TEDx Yerevan and a number of other things related to development sector. Mostly coaching leaders in development sector to craft ideas, new projects. So I'm really curious, what's the added value of emerging leaders initiative for you as a development sector worker? And PR and communication is really important because development sector is really failing on telling their stories. That's a major gap we have, and we need to do something about it. So if you could share, and if you could also, from your perspective, advise what type of development sector workers should try to reach out to the program and tell what they need and how they can get involved. Yeah. Thank you.
So the Emerging Leaders Programme has been fantastic, I think, for all of us in helping us to tell our stories. We've had media training, we've been videoed, we've been interviewed, so we've had lots of practice, and I think we'd all agree that we've probably changed our stories as a result. Working in a scientific organisation, we really struggle to tell stories about what the MSc does. It's incredibly technical, and you can get lost in jargon very easily. And I think what's coming out of this forum and everything we've been doing is you need to look for those real-life examples and personal experiences. Regarding who should... who could join the Emerging Leaders Programme, I don't see that, I don't think there's any barriers. You just got to look at the group here to see how diverse it is, and everybody's got a story to tell. You just need to find it, I think.
Thank you, Jo. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.